More than a century after its tragic end, the Titanic is still sharing its secrets with, among others, our own ship Reed.
In the movie Titanic, the characters played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet spent some intimate moments in her elegant suite. This looks familiar.
Yes, well, this is the first class suite from the Titanic, from the 1997 movie, Titanic.
Blockbuster movie.
Blockbuster movie.
That movie set now resides at the National Geographic Museum in Washington, D.C. These are the actual props from the movie.
The actual props from the movie.
And there are plenty of real artifacts here, too. Catherine Keene, National Geographic's Vice President for Public Experiences, says the focus of the exhibit is the meaning and the mystery of the ill-fated ship. Well, no mystery here. That's a deck chair.
That's a deck chair. Fascinating artifact. One of only 7 that still exists. The crew of the Titanic were just throwing these things overboard, hoping that the passengers in the water might have something to hold on to.
The exhibit tells the stories of Titanic's heroes, like Wallace Hartley and his 8-person band, who played until the very end.
His body was recovered with this beautiful music pouch, and it was full of some of the music that you see.
Is this the actual music he was carrying?
The actual music that he was carrying when he was recovered from the site.
Of the 2,200 people on the Titanic, more than 1,500 died, including 47-year-old John Jacob Astor, the wealthiest person on board.
This was the watch he wore with him everywhere.
His 18-year-old wife, who wore this life preserver, survived. Why did he not survive?
Well, it's a sad story, but he was on the wrong side of the ship. On the side of the ship that he was on, they were only allowing women and children into
So he was
lifeboat.
denied a seat on a lifeboat, even though there was a seat, because he was a man.
That's correct.
For the time being, I shall require only women and children.
It was a horrifying 2 hours and 40 minutes before the Titanic disappeared beneath the waves. It then plunged more than 2 miles to the bottom of the Atlantic, where it rested unseen by human eyes for 73 years.
This is it!
But the sinking of the Titanic is no less mind-boggling than the discovery of its wreckage. In 1985, oceanographer and Naval Reserve Commanding Officer Robert Ballard stunned the world when he found the Titanic. But how he did it remained a highly classified U.S. government Cold War secret for decades. We met Ballard at National Geographic to hear the Titanic's untold story. You did a number of very top-secret naval missions during the Cold War.
I was a naval officer, yes.
Can you talk about them? Not at all?
No.
Only this one?
Only one be declassified.
The story of finding the Titanic starts in 1982 when Ballard was developing his own remotely operated underwater vehicle. Unable to get science grants, he asked Deputy Chief of Naval Operations Ronald Thunman if the Navy would help fund his project.
He said, all my life I wanted to go find the Titanic. And I was taken aback by that. I said, well, come on, this is a serious top secret operation. Find the Titanic, that's crazy.
Thunman said yes, but only if Ballard used the funds and the time to find 2 missing U.S. nuclear submarines, the Thresher and the Scorpion, that sank in the Atlantic in the 1960s.
So it was a deal. You'll let me do what I want to do, and if I'll do what you want to do.
This sounds like the real hunt for Red October.
Very similar.
The focus of this mission was to find the Scorpion.
They didn't want anyone else to find it.
Like the Russians?
Yes.
This was a really top secret mission.
It was very top secret.
Above top secret, I'm sure.
And so I said, well, let's tell the world I'm going after the Titanic.
The top secret part of the mission took longer than Ballard expected, so when he found the Scorpion and was finally free to look for the Titanic, he only had 12 days left. But his experience finding the Scorpion had been invaluable.
I learned something from mapping the the Scorpion, that taught me how to find the Titanic. Look for its trail of debris.
So you found it in 8 days, basically.
Yeah.
Because
And people had taken 60 days and not found it. I did it in 8.
And how much time did you have left when
4.
you found? You had 4 days left
to film it.
and you couldn't go beyond that 4 days.
No, someone else had rented the ship.
That was
They
it.
didn't care.
Ballard still vividly remembers that moment when he first set eyes on the Titanic. But he also remembers how the mood suddenly changed.
We realized we were dancing on someone's grave, and we were embarrassed. And the mood, it was like someone took a wall switch, went, and we became sober, calm, respectful, and made a promise to never take anything from that ship and to treat it with great respect.
Because that was like grave robbing.
It was like you don't go to Gettysburg with a shovel, and you don't take belt buckles off the Arizona.
Catherine Keene says it's that sense of respect for the Titanic and its victims that gives it its timeless quality. Why do you think, after all these years, people are still so fascinated with the Titanic?
I think there are lessons from the Titanic that we are somehow still compelled to want to hear. We're always pushing the boundaries of technology and exploration, but the story of the Titanic reminds us that there are great risks and tragedies that accrue to those ambitions. And there are also great stories of heroism and survival in this story that give us hope that maybe somehow we'll learn as a species from our mistakes.
Write your most closely guarded secret on a postcard. Then pop it in the mailbox. It's an offer a surprising number of people can't resist. Tell Me a Secret is our cover story, reported by Lee Cowan.
Well, every week I still feel like a kid Christmas morning with all these kind of gifts to go through. And for me, time just disappears.
Frank Warren is one of the few people who gets more actual mail than email. The old-fashioned kind. Homemade postcards. About 100 show up at his home every week. And written on each one is a stranger's secret. A confession of sorts, sent to Frank anonymously.
When people I love leave voicemails on my phone, I always save them in case they die tomorrow, and I have no other way of hearing their voice ever again.
You called me an idiot, so I sent your bags to the wrong destination. Whoops, I guess you were right.
I read every postcard, I keep every secret. I think it's a precious and singular archive.
That's how you look at it, as an archive?
Yeah, an archive of our hidden selves.
An archive that now numbers well over 1 million secrets, and counting.
My older neighbor let the weeds grow knee-high in his yard. It looked terrible. Then he died, and it dawned on me that he just needed help. I'm sorry.
It all started back in 2004, when Frank was working on a suicide prevention hotline. Hearing plenty of strangers' secrets, he soon realized something.
Well, sometimes I think that maybe one of the reasons I started the whole project is because I felt like I needed a place to share my secrets and stories. And so thinking I was creating it for others, maybe I needed it the most myself. These are the postcards I started the project with the simple instructions. I would take a postcard and hand it to somebody. I'd say, "Hi, my name's Frank, and I collect secrets."
People look at you a little weird?
It still feels kind of weird to say it, to be honest with you.
But the idea grew and grew and grew.
There are no limits to the artwork that you could put on a postcard. And I've seen all kinds. I've seen people include a photograph, a collage, a drawing. Sometimes people send me objects, not even postcards.
Objects?
I've received secrets on coconuts, a purse, a license plate frame, a flip-flop. You name it, if it fits in my mailbox, somebody's probably mailed it with a confession on it to me.
Every Sunday for the last 14 years, he scans a few of them and shares these stranger secrets on his blog, postsecret.com.
I think I've learned that everybody has at least one secret that could break your heart.
Secrets like this one.
I tell people I'm new in town to explain why I have no friends. I've lived here my entire life.
Or this one.
I'm getting weight loss surgery next month, and what scares me the most about it isn't the dangers or complications, but that I will finally find out whether people dislike me because I was fat or if they just hated my personality. In some ways, I think when we keep a secret, that secret's actually keeping us.
In what way?
Maybe haunting us, maybe inviting us to reconcile with part of our past we're hiding from, maybe keeping us from having intimate relationships with others or ourselves.
I have 11 secrets that I've never told to anyone. It is both my biggest fear and my greatest desire to find someone I trust enough to share all of them with.
Post Secret has become a phenomenon, having had more than 800 million views to date. Not only that, but it spawned 6 books and several exhibitions, like this one, currently at the Museum of Man in San Diego, where you'll find it as quiet as a church.
There is a sense of, I think, respect and reverence for the courage it took for everyday people to really open up and share something with a stranger they've never done before.
Among them are humorous ones, like this. I work at the Apple Store and judge you by which color iPod you pick. But many of them are pretty tough to read. I pray every night that I won't wake up in the morning. This one read, I don't think God is listening. Here's another. Dad, I know you keep your gun loaded and unlocked.
The reaction is usually just like, this is incredible. I can't believe what I've read. This is really special.
It is a little overwhelming, too, right?
It can be. It can be.
Erika Katayama is the director of exhibits at the Museum of Man and has never seen a response to his show quite like this.
You often read one that hits close to home, that is really something that feels like it could be your secret.
Visitors are encouraged to leave their own, and each week, the museum's mailbox of secrets is overflowing. Some of those may one day be posted on Frank's blog, too.
There's always at least one every week that hits you either right here in the gut or right here in the funny bone.
Natalie Starr was first introduced to the project by her therapist. She started putting Post-it notes next to the secrets that resonated with her. But one in particular, she says, changed her life.
I tell people that I don't believe in God, when really I just refuse to worship a God that would let my grandfather hurt me like he did. I was sexually molested when I was 4 by my maternal grandfather.
She had been in therapy for years, but not until she saw the pain of others, mailed to Frank from all over the world, did she realize it was okay to not be okay.
I can't tell you what it's like. I can't tell you what it's like to be sexually assaulted. You wouldn't understand. I mean, I can tell you, but you would never really get it. But there's somebody out there who does. That means that I'm not a freak. It means I'm not broken. I'm not a failure. I'm not wrong.
You're the most trusted stranger. I just want to tell you things. I don't even know you. I don't know.
Frank now takes his secrets on the road, mostly to college campuses, like here at North Carolina State.
This one says, I'm in love with someone who has been given 4 years to live. We're both 19. Wow. This one came from campus.
He talks about the power of releasing a secret, and then he asks students to try it.
But I grew up with an autistic brother and a brother who is gay, and I secretly wished that I had something that, I stood out so that my parents would pay attention to me more.
Sometimes just by saying the secret out loud, you make it go away.
Frank doesn't know how long he'll continue to be the seeker of secrets, although he admits stopping may not be his choice. The secrets keep showing up at his door, and he keeps reading. Inspired, humbled, sometimes saddened, but always comforted in the knowledge that we're not as alone in our thoughts as we might think.
I think secrets are inexhaustible, like poetry or songs, And just when you think you've seen the funniest one or the most romantic one, the most hopeful one, the most crushing one, you'll get one that still takes your breath away.
In our postcard from Florence, Seth Doan shares a secret of the Italian Renaissance, some 500 years in the making.
There's a small gray door down here. They'll take us into the Passageway corridor.
In Ron Howard's film Inferno, Tom Hanks uses it as an escape route. The Vasari corridor enables Hanks' character to evade police in the center of Florence, emerging into the Uffizi Gallery. This passageway was a World War II escape path in Roberto Rossellini's 1946 film Paisa, and has been a fascination long before the advent of film. It dates back to the Renaissance.
This is a lot of fuss over a hallway.
This is a very special hallway.
Ike Schmidt met us in this very special hallway, which was closed in 2016 for repairs and fire code updates.
You are the first to shoot in here.
We visited in March last year when it was still under renovation and when Schmidt was still director of Florence's Uffizi Gallery, which manages the Vasari corridor, and reopened it in December.
That was the daily commute on foot, pedestrian commute of the Grand Dukes for several centuries.
It was built in 1565 for the powerful Cosimo de' Medici and his family.
Nowadays, we have skyways in Houston, especially in Minneapolis, for climatic reasons. But back then, it was totally unique.
And constructed for, let's call them, practical reasons.
The Medici could easily move backwards and forward. No one knew where they were. The Vasari corridor also served to listen to the people on the street. There was no technological surveillance back then. But opening the windows, even today, you hear every single word that is being spoken on the street.
This was about convenience, it was about safety for the Medici, it was about security.
Absolutely.
The skyway snakes for more than half a mile through Florence, stretching from the Uffizi, then the seat of government, above the streets, across the river, past the Boboli Gardens to Palazzo Pitti.
It's a very long hallway which connects two of the most important buildings in Florence, but originally it didn't go that far. It ended in the Boboli Gardens. And that changed with Ferdinando de' Medici, who connected it with the Pitti Palace, which became the new home of the Medici family after Eleonora of Toledo had acquired it.
What does the reopening mean?
The reopening means a lot of emails, a lot of requests.
Elaine Ruffalo is an art historian who does tours of Florence.
What is the fascination?
The fascination is because people like to enter a space that is exclusive. They feel like it's secret. I mean, how do you build a kilometer-long corridor running through the very heart of Florence in 5 months? I mean, hats off to Giorgio Vasari, the architect. Of course, there's big money behind it. It was Medici money, Medici ducal money.
Who were the Medici?
So the Medici come on the scene as early as the mid-13th century. Like so many other families that are pouring into Florence to try to make some money after this period of the Middle Ages. And they began as merchants, but then they became bankers. And the Medici got their hands on the papal bank account. And from that on, it was an explosion of wealth.
We met Ruffalo on the banks of the Arno River.
So Giorgio Vasari built this thing in 1565 in only 5 months. But one reason he was able to do so quickly is he was using pre-existing buildings to help carry the Vasari corridor. So if you look up this way, you can see that there's a series of arches that at one time was the old fish market. Then he turns left at the top of the Ponte Vecchio, uses the oldest bridge in Florence.
The aptly named Ponte Vecchio, or Old Bridge, was built in 1345. Today it's home to jewelers and goldsmiths, another legacy of the Medici.
This bridge originally was a place where they would sell fish and meat and tanners, and anything you can imagine, like a medieval souk almost.
Why the change?
Well, because when the Medici finished their corridor, it was Ferdinando de' Medici in 1593 who didn't want the smell of all that fish and meat as he was making his way to the Palazzo Pitti.
Pesky vendors removed, a fancy skyway installed for VIPs. It all sounds pretty familiar.
And above, of course, the Medici are walking over your heads and you're not even aware of it.
And now visitors can again retrace the steps of the Medici in a passageway which seems to lead to another time.
The old adage tells us to love the art, not the artist. Well, in the case of the famously anonymous Banksy, you pretty much have no choice. Seth Doan has one of our Sunday best, a portrait of one elusive artist.
Most artists have an obsession that defines their work. Monet had light, Hockney has color. I've got police response time. That's Banksy in his own words. Once seen as a vandal, he's now revered for his work. It sells for millions. But the famously anonymous street artist's most ambitious masterpiece may be keeping his identity hidden.
Did you hear directly from Banksy?
No, this is one of, I suppose, the great mysteries. I've never met him. I've never spoken to him.
Putting together last year's Banksy exhibition, and the only one the artist has authorized in 15 years, required extensive planning and a cover story. Gareth James, who manages the Gallery of Modern Art in Glasgow, Scotland, was telling people they'd be refurbishing the windows.
I had to keep it secret from colleagues, family, and friends.
Did you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement?
Yep.
The idea, James says, was for this show to just appear unannounced, like Banksy's work. Cut and Run, 25 years card labor, featured the stencils for many of his best-known images and work from as far back as the late 90s. Banksy recreated his childhood bedroom, where he explains how this scene from the cult movie Jaws inspired him.
Sick vandalism. That is a deliberate mutilation of a public service message.
It showed me everything I needed to know about graffiti, he writes. It should be audacious and funny.
It seems that so much of this exhibition is the captions.
Yeah, you really maybe come away with a feeling of having an insight, or maybe even trying to get to know Banksy a bit, because that voice is there.
Banksy's political voice has always been there in his art. He often champions the underdog, be it migrants or Palestinians in the West Bank, where in the shadow of Israel's separation barrier, he created the walled-off hotel.
This was Banksy's idea.
This is Banksy here.
Yeah, this is Banksy. This is original Banksy.
His art is coveted, but of course, graffiti is not exactly legal.
The anonymity was there from the minute I met him.
It was more about avoiding problems with the police.
It was all about avoiding problems with the police and nothing to do with it being a promotional tool. Quite quickly, it became the best promotional tool that anyone could ever invent.
Steve Lazaridis was an early associate of Banksy's in the working-class English town of Bristol.
What kind of guy is he?
Difficult.
In what way?
Just in that way that sometimes people that are a genius at what they're doing. There's no taking away from the fact that the guy's is a legend. He was making images and messages that everyone could understand, and I think that's what was the game changer. Like suddenly someone was making art that you didn't feel stupid looking at.
He's sometimes criticized for that too, that it's too simplistic.
Yeah, but he's only criticised by, and I'm going to swear, by in the art world. They've never liked him. They've never liked the movement. It's been at the fore now for almost 30 years, and all of that without any help from the art world.
What's interesting, though, there is now this dance between these two worlds.
But now the art world wants it.
Lazaridis says he has thousands of photos of Banksy working. Some he's published. Though they've parted ways, he has not publicly revealed the artist's identity.
It's a tough world to get into, Banksy's world?
It's not tough, it's impossible.
I deal in very important artworks by major museum artists, from Picasso to Damien Hirst, and there is nowhere near this level of secrecy or gamesmanship almost.
What do you mean by gamesmanship?
It's a bit Wild West.
Akaris Andipa is one of the biggest collectors and dealers of Banksy's work out of his London gallery.
Banksy has managed to create a new set of rules within the art world, which is, if it doesn't have a certificate of authenticity, you should not sell it. You should not buy it. And that's astonishing. It also opens a quagmire of problems. What happens if the artist doesn't like an early work?
Or what happens if the artist doesn't like the person seeking the authenticity?
Yeah, problem, right?
Whew, the art world is interesting.
Wild West.
It was Banksy's 2004 work Napalm which first piqued Andipa's interest.
The perfect balance of frivolity with serious elements. You know, you have a little snigger first, a little laugh, because it's light-hearted, but then you kind of suck your teeth a little. Actually, there's some weight to it.
How much is it Banksy's message? How much is it his pure skill as an artist?
He is actually quite painterly, but he's chosen to execute his work through stencils, much like Andy Warhol did through screen prints.
Mr. Banksy, girl with balloon, ladies and gentlemen, standing in the front.
But there's no precedent in the art world for this.
Can I sell it now? And sell it for $860,000.
Shredding a piece seconds after it was sold at auction for $1.4 million. An irreverent middle finger to the establishment is a theme of his work, but the stunt actually added value. The shredded painting resold a few years later for $25 million. Yet the artist's identity remains unconfirmed.
Am I going to reveal it? Probably not.
And those who do know it are bound, or choose, not to expose him.
There are institutions, including UK papers, that would pay a lot of money for him to be unmasked. Not one person has stepped up to take the bounty.
How can that be?
At the risk of overly romanticizing, one has to assume that he's a good person. He knows how to look after the people around him.
Would something change if we knew his identity?
I'm not sure, and I really hope we never find out.
It's the world's most well-known secret society. Rich with symbols and ritual, it's a source of legends, parodies.
Who controls the British crown? Who keeps the metric system down? We do.
And conspiracy theories.
Because so much organized crime uses the Masonic secret system and the good old boy network to be able to get away with murder. And I mean murder.
Welcome to the world of Freemasonry.
True or false, the Masons are a secret society?
No, that's false.
UCLA history professor Margaret Jacob is one of the world's leading experts on Freemasonry.
True or false, Freemasonry is a religion?
No, it's false.
True or false, Masons were behind the American Revolution?
False. False, false.
Okay, but what about on the dollar bill? The eye and the pyramid?
Yeah.
I mean, that's Masonic, right?
No, everybody says it's Masonic. In fact, it's a commonplace in the 18th century, that particular set of symbols.
True, Freemasons laid the cornerstone of America. Well, at least some of its most iconic structures. So what is Freemasonry? Simply put, it's the world's oldest and largest fraternity. Its membership a who's who of world history. George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Winston Churchill, Mozart, Davy Crockett, Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Houdini, Gerald Ford, Henry Ford, John Wayne, even Colonel Sanders. If you want to be a Mason, you can petition a local lodge for membership. You'll need to demonstrate good character and belief in some sort of supreme being. Oh, and in almost all lodges, it's men only. Next, you're up for a vote, says New York State Grand Master James Sullivan.
The lodge votes to accept you, and then you have the 3 degrees that you go through.
Once you earn the 3rd degree, and yes, that's where the phrase comes from, you can join any number of Masonic offshoots. Take Brent Morris. He's a 33rd degree Mason and a historian at the House of the Temple for the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite of the Southern Jurisdiction. You know, it's that big building in Washington, D.C.
This isn't like the Masonic Vatican, but it's an important building.
It's an important building. Absolutely right. It's one branch of Freemasonry in the United States, and that's our headquarters building.
Inside, the Temple Lodge room is a stunner. And downstairs, there's this.
This is the flag that Buzz Aldrin took to the moon with him.
This flag, Supreme Council 33 Southern Jurisdiction, went to the moon. Wow.
Now, if tiny hats and small cars are your thing, then there are the party animals of Freemasonry, the Shriners. You may know them better for their 22 children's hospitals, where patients don't have to pay a cent. The Masons are philanthropic. They reportedly donate $2 million to charity every day. Freemasonry began in medieval Europe as a guild for stonemasons, but lived on as a social organization.
1717, the first Grand Lodge is created in London. And now there are many men in these lodges that are not associated with the trade organization. They're gentlemen masons.
They're not stonecutters.
They're not stonecutters. And so something has happened. A modern fraternity has been created.
It wasn't long afterward that the conspiracy theories began.
All these men with different neighborhoods, different professions, meeting in the cafe, breaking bread together, doing rituals. What could this be? So the response on the part of the authorities was, oh my God, this is a conspiracy.
And so in 1738, Pope Clement XII issued the Catholic Church's first decree against Freemasonry, and it still applies today. In the U.S., Freemasonry flourished until its secrecy made it the object of suspicion here, spawning America's first third party, the Anti-Masonic Party. It elected 8 congressmen, but lost the 1828 presidential election to Andrew Jackson, a proud Mason.
Let us pray.
Today, Freemasonry has about 1.3 million members in the U.S., down from 4 million in 1959.
Tell God and Heavenly Father, the supreme architect of the universe.
Among the members today, African Americans, formerly relegated to a separate black-only branch of Freemasonry. And then there are members like those in Colonial Lodge number 1821 of Washington, D.C. Most of them are in their 20s, and some attracted to Freemasonry by Dan Brown novels and movies like National Treasure.
They formed a new brotherhood called the Freemasons in honor of the builders of the Great Temple.
Who here was sort of drawn by the mystery?
I mean, I'll confess part of it. I think it's all.
I think
it's a combination of history, tradition, and mystery as well. You know there's ritual, but you don't know what it is. Exactly. And that, how can you not be?
That's alluring.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason people joined Freemasonry and not the Rotarians.
So what about those secrets?
What would happen if I found out the secret handshake and I weren't a Mason?
Nothing.
You wouldn't have to kill me?
We might take you out and buy you a beer. The secrets of a Mason represent my integrity as a man. I took a promise that I would not tell you what the secrets of a Mason are. I didn't take a promise that I would care if you know what they are.
Also a big secret? The meetings. No non-Masons or cameras are allowed, but St. John's Lodge number 1 of New York City agreed to give us a glimpse of one. For meetings, Masons dress up in their Sunday best and, just like the original stonecutters, wear aprons. At the center of any lodge room is an altar.
And all the activities of the lodge take place about the altar.
Piers Vaughn is the lodge master.
And would people talk about religion here in a meeting?
Absolutely not. There are certain subjects which are prevented from discussing within the lodge, and religion is one, politics is another.
Religion and politics. Someone said that Masons were raised right.
Yes.
And then there are the ceremonies. Each one teaches a moral lesson related to the legend of one Hiram Abiff, the architect of King Solomon's Temple. They can be a little unusual, as pointed out in this recruitment video.
Even while blindfolded, try to concentrate on what you are asked, what is said to you, and what is happening around you. Everything will be explained to you in later sections of the degree.
When a candidate comes in through the door, he's blindfolded because symbolically he's in a state of darkness, because Masonry is all about moving from darkness into Masonic light.
That it's about being unenlightened and then enlightened?
That's right.
As for what happens after that, well, that's a secret. But for members, Freemasonry is about something much simpler.
I have met a group of men that I enjoy being with. These are people that I go out to dinner with, we socialize together. They're guys I like to hang with. They're my friends.
The Secret Service can't afford to fail, even once, in its mission to protect the president and other top officials, which means there's no ignoring some of the charges in our next story, reported by Jim Axelrod.
It was all there plain to see on January 6th, the valor of the Secret Service agents protecting Vice President Mike Pence.
So the bravery is pretty amazing when they find a way to surreptitiously leave as people are tromping through the building, rioters in various amounts of war gear.
But as Pulitzer Prize-winning Washington Post reporter Carol Leonnig spells out in her new book about the Secret Service, Zero Fail, there was another, darker side to the agency on display that day as well.
There are a lot of members of the Secret Service Presidential Protection Division who cheer on that riot on the Capitol grounds that day.
How do we know that?
In social media posts, many of these people shared their views, explaining that the election was rigged. Donald Trump has been denied his fair and rightful second term.
This dualism, says Leonnig, heroism on one hand, scandal on the other, has been the story of a deeply troubled agency during the last decade.
Time and time again, the Secret Service has chosen to cover up a problem rather than fix it. This is a great agency with unbelievable patriots, but it needs a house cleaning. It needs help.
The modern Secret Service is less than 60 years old. Consider that in August of 1962, President Kennedy could sneak away from his detail during a weekend in Santa Monica and go for a dip on a crowded beach.
In Dallas, Texas, 3 shots were fired at President Kennedy's motorcade in downtown Dallas.
Dallas changed everything.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
JFK's death was a gut punch to the country like no other. But if you think it was bad for the country, you have no idea how bad it was for the Secret Service. They rebuilt that agency. They made it so rigorous as a result of that tragedy.
The training and protocols of the post-Dallas Secret Service saved President Ford from not 1, but 2 assassination attempts in 1975.
My God, there's been a shot. There's been a shot.
Mr. President! And prepared Agent Tim McCarthy to take a bullet meant for President Reagan in 1981.
There's no more heroic image of that than Tim McCarthy on the day outside the Hilton when John Hinckley shoots at Ronald Reagan. And Tim McCarthy, what does he do? He throws up his chest to take it.
But critics say that urgency has been eroded by insufficient budgets ever since the Secret Service was absorbed by the Department of Homeland Security in 2003.
So the Secret Service hires phenomenal people. They need to hire more of them.
Former agent Jonathan Wackrow was with the Secret Service for 14 years.
They're the redheaded stepchildren, right? Get them more money. Give them every tool to be successful. Do more with more. Don't do more with less.
From 2009 to 2014, Wackrow served on the details protecting President and Mrs. Obama, which gives him insight into another problem plaguing the Secret Service that more money can't address: a culture lacking transparency and accountability. On November 11, 2011, a man fired a rifle at the White House, striking the building 7 times. The Obamas weren't home, but their daughters were. Despite agents reporting gunfire, Lenig writes they were told by superiors to stand down. Secret Service leadership initially told no one, not their agents, not the public, not even President and Mrs. Obama.
Thankfully didn't have a tragic outcome. But afterwards, nothing. There was no, hey, let's get everybody together and let's review what happened.
But how could there not be?
The Secret Service is the best organization in the world in crisis management, yet they can't manage themselves. It was an embarrassment, but you have to learn from it.
The embarrassments continued. The next year, 12 Secret Service agents were sent home from Cartagena, Colombia, where they were doing advance work for a presidential trip. They were drunk. Some had prostitutes in their room, where agents had plans for Mr. Obama's visit. A huge security risk.
That was very troubling to me. The idea that agents, particularly overseas, would put themselves in positions of being compromised led me to really have questions about the leadership of the agency.
Michael Chertoff oversaw the Secret Service as Secretary of Homeland Security under President George W. Bush. He was out of government when Cartagena took place, but still found it painful.
Not only is it embarrassing to have them engaged in this kind of illicit activity, but to do it in a foreign country is really risking operational security. It did seem to me to be a wake-up call.
This wake-up call would also go unanswered. 2 years later, in 2014, a man with a limp, wearing Crocs, and armed with a knife jumped a White House fence and made it all the way to the foot of the stairs leading to the private residence. An alarming and dangerous breach with deficient follow-up.
There should be what we call a hot wash after an incident like this to see what are the lessons learned.
Because 3 years later, it happened again. You have the second jumper, so where was the hot wash?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if there was a hot wash or whether they just assumed since nobody got hurt, no big deal. But that's really tempting fate, and I think that that's a big mistake.
Many of the agents told me, we are succeeding by luck. We have great energy, great dedication, but we're lucky that this hasn't happened.
And luck can't be a policy.
That's right, absolutely.
The idea that the men and women of the Secret Service are not given the support, resources, or leadership to do their jobs effectively, that the Secret Service is an agency in trouble, unwilling to examine its own issues, is an alarming set of allegations. We made multiple requests here at Secret Service headquarters for the agency to respond. They declined our request for an interview.
Instead, they provided a statement. The U.S. Secret Service is aware of a newly released book which rehashes past challenges the agency overcame and evolved from. The agency's skilled workforce is dedicated to the successful execution of its critical missions.
That statement, in your view, needs one more sentence?
Needs one more sentence. It says, however, we are going to undertake a mission reassurance review. That's what's going to make you do something better. It's the after action.
The leadership became more frightened of letting people know how bad it was behind the curtain.
The agency has demonstrated remarkable valor and bravery, but it hasn't demonstrated transparency.
No, it doesn't really like that word.
But without it, Lenig says, the Secret Service will continue to function with a capacity inadequate to meet its mission and its duty, shielding itself with the fact that since Dallas, they've been successful in the only way that matters.
I don't criticize the men and women who are dedicating their lives to this. And we have to be able to look closely at how they're being shortchanged. The way in which we're not really letting them be able to do their job and deliver on the promise they've made.
In your book, are you detailing the exceptions or the rules?
They are symptoms of something larger going on behind the scenes. And if these failures can happen, it's just a matter of time. Shouldn't we pay attention before that happens? Shouldn't we do something before that happens?
Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
That's just one of the songs that inspired a generation back in the 1960s. All these years later, the legendary Joan Baez is still at it. But as Tracy Smith found out, singing isn't her only talent.
Well, as I remember, your eyes were bluer than robin's eggs. My poetry was lousy, you said.
For 60 years, Joan Baez traveled the world, raising her clear soprano voice in song and in protest.
And if you're offering me diamonds and rust, I've already paid.
But in 2018, she toured for the last time and came home to this little slice of paradise near San Francisco, where she feels free to express a less serious side.
You are the farthest thing from a witch.
They're good witches.
That is true.
If she's a witch, she's got magic to spare. Along with singing, Baez has been drawing upside down and writing backwards since she was a kid.
So we'll put a hat on this lady to make it interesting.
Oh, yeah. And now she's put her drawings in a book.
There's Paul Simon.
Oh, yeah, Paul Simon. That's great.
She's also been painting portraits.
And Willie.
Willie never got finished, but it's definitely Willie.
And she's taking a fresh look at herself in a new documentary opening in theaters nationwide next week called Joan Baez, I Am a Noise.
Did you know going in that you would reveal these secrets?
Going in was, why don't we do something about Joan's last tour? And I decided I really wanted to leave an honest legacy, you know, about everything. And so that's when I gave the directors a key to my storage unit.
Her mother saved everything: home movies, letters, drawings. But Joan had never even looked at it.
When I go in there, it's the first time I've ever been. First time. Yeah. I pitched myself into a sea of memories and headed blindly for the marrow of the inner core me. Dark, dark, dark. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
Joan Baez's public life is well documented. 40 studio and live albums, just about every music honor there is, including her 2017 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Amazing grace.
And decades of concerts and marches and human rights causes.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome.
You were there for the March on Washington in 1963 with Dr. Martin Luther King. Were you hopeful then?
I was smart then, and I was smart enough to know that we shall overcome did not mean probably in this lifetime. So I was dug in. I mean, I knew this was going to be a long battle.
In the 1960s, she toured with a fellow warrior, Bob Dylan. They fell in love, but it didn't last.
You said that Bob Dylan broke your heart.
It was probably the deepest I've ever felt for somebody, and I had a little clue to that is I think when somebody walks away from you, you feel a lot more than if you walk away from them. And I got walked away from in a big way, and it was hard to get over. Hi, Bob.
In 1967, Baez was arrested for blocking the entrances to military induction centers in Oakland, California. The journalist and anti-Vietnam War activist David Harris visited her in jail.
You two got married, you got pregnant, and then he went to prison.
Mm-hmm.
That is a rough way to start a
Yeah,
marriage.
it was not ideal way to start. And for me, you know, somebody who wanted to be a perfect wife and perfect mother and all of that, it was, none of it really was possible. But, you know, these chickens.
The chicken just wants to comment.
Who's at the door? Hello, ladies.
Seems fitting that Joan Baez has a flock of chickens. She says she does better with crowds than one-on-one.
The one-on-one was too difficult. The one on 2000, not such a problem.
She and David Harris divorced amicably in 1973, and she's happily single.
I don't want to take on one more thing, like trying to find the appropriate partner. It seems such an exhausting idea that I said, I quit.
Baez and her son Gabriel have stayed close. But she says her relationship with her own parents was complicated, and her mental health often suffered.
I walk out on the stage and they said, oh, she looks so peaceful. Exactly the opposite of what was going on inside.
In the documentary, Baez reveals that as adults, she and her sister Mimi came to believe that their father had been sexually inappropriate with them when they were children. She can't remember all the details, and her parents both denied it happened.
Many parents who've been involved in this cycle and their kids accuse them, they don't remember. I wanted to remember. I couldn't until I was 50 years old. And they blocked it out.
But now that her parents and her sister are gone, Baez felt it was a secret she needed to share.
Most people with a lot of this stuff are not going to talk about it. And then you can't really heal, I don't think, without being able to express yourself. The letting the secrets out and the way we did it has opened some doors for people, which is like icing on the cake for me. Say when.
When.
And here's another, less painful secret she's just now sharing with us. At 82, Joan Baez has a new voice.
I've discovered really recently that I'm happy in this little pocket of vocalizing.
Where is it? Can you?
Low, it's really, really low, yeah.
Maybe a blessing?
It's a blessing. I've been enjoying it. I'm not the one you want, babe. I'm not the one you need.
That's It Ain't Me, Babe by her old friend Bob Dylan.
You're looking for someone who will promise never to part.
Joan Baez is still using her voice in other ways, too. In June, she went with a children's nonprofit to Ukraine. But the woman who spent most of her life on the road and in the trenches has found a certain quiet she never knew before.
Are you at peace?
I would say, yeah. I'm able to conduct myself in a certain way that I feel at peace with a lot of things I wouldn't have dreamed. I finally realized I don't have to solve everybody's problems and make world peace and do a concert all at once, you know. What a relief. You know, I can breathe instead.
On display in Philadelphia, an exhibit honoring the genius of the Italian master Amedeo Modigliani. Serena Altschul is our guide.
Narrow faces, haunting eyes, elongated necks, all well-known characteristics of an Amedeo Modigliani masterpiece. Less well-known, the brains behind that brush.
It's not that often that you get to be in front of a Modigliani without the glass in front of it.
And without the frame.
Yes, so there it is.
Barbara Buckley is a chief conservator at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia, where a team of curators and conservators are using new technologies to unearth old secrets from beneath the canvas. Their findings are part of an exhibition, Modigliani Up Close.
One of the really fun things was looking at some of the early paintings where he was painting over canvases that had already been painted upon. Sometimes his own canvases, sometimes canvases that had been painted on by a different artist.
Buckley found Modigliani often incorporated those underdrawings into his finished pieces.
So he's using them in really creative ways. He's allowing some of the nuances of the color of the painting below to be integrated into the painting on the surface.
One of the discoveries of this exhibition was that Modigliani used a very wide and varied palette of more than 20 colors. We had previously thought he only used about 5.
Cindy Kang is a curator with the Barnes. She says the artist fools the eye into thinking parts of the figure are monochromatic.
You can see in her bangs, it looks like she just has dark hair, but there's pops of blue and of red.
Modigliani, as Italians say, was born in Livorno, Italy in 1884 to an Italian Jewish family. His parents encouraged his passion for the arts. Modigliani's mother educated her son by taking him to visit cultural institutions all over the country.
He did have a very classical training, and you can still see that. It's all very, very meticulously planned.
In 1906, he moved to the center of the art world, Paris. He was a member of the School of Paris, a group of artists living in the City of Light. But he didn't see all of his contemporaries as inspiration.
Picasso and Braque were developing Cubism. They were working with collage. They were really interested in interrogating pictorial structure. Modigliani was interested in something else. And so this is why he was so dedicated to the figure.
Modigliani painted and sculpted, the latter practice lasting only a few years, but becoming consequential to his method.
When we think of Modigliani and his signature style, it's the faces, the long necks. Where did that come from?
You need to go back to his sculpture. He was getting his blocks from construction sites in Paris. The blocks that Modigliani was using to sculpt heads were very long rectangular blocks.
Would he pay for them?
We don't know exactly. Maybe he stole them in the cover of the night. Maybe he was paying for them. We don't know exactly.
Amedeo Modigliani died in 1920 at the age of 35 from tuberculosis. And while his career may have been fleeting, his legacy was anything but.
Is everything that's going to be looked at?
Oh, there's always more.
There's more.
There's always more. Yeah, this is just the beginning.
A man who's been learning from history all his life is now in charge of a vast organization that teaches those lessons to the rest of us. This morning, he takes our Chip Reed on a tour.
Look at that plane. Look how little it is. It is a tiny plane.
Lonnie Bunch is captivated by American history, and he'd like us to join him in learning from the past, for better and for worse.
It's my job to tell the unvarnished truth, to illuminate all the dark corners of the American past. In a museum that's going to talk about difficult issues, you try to find the right tension between those stories that are going to make you cry, because you better cry. But there are also those stories that give you that resiliency, that make you smile.
Smiles, resiliency, and tears are at the core of the story of Lonnie Bunch. By way of introduction, in June, Bunch was named Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. He's in charge of 19 museums, 21 libraries, the National Zoo, 7,000 employees, and a budget of $1.5 billion, and a mission that he believes is nothing short of monumental.
What's clear to me is that the Smithsonian is part of the glue that holds a country together. Culture is so important. Culture is something that sometimes is seen as dividing people, but in my mind, culture holds us together. The common cultures we have, the opportunity to find common ground.
There are an estimated 155 million objects in the Smithsonian's collection. We asked Bunch to choose 4 that have special meaning for him.
So does this plane still fly?
It doesn't fly, but it looks like it could.
Some have intensely personal connections, including the spirit of St. Louis, which inspired him as a child.
My father was a scientist, and as a kid, we would come down to the Smithsonian because it was a kind of safe place that African Americans could go. And he'd take me into the Arts and Industries building, and he'd talk about Lindbergh.
In 1927, Charles Lindbergh made the first solo, nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean. He was just 25 years old.
What's so amazing about it is that what it took for him to not panic, to keep himself under control as he flew for those 33 and a half hours, and then the wonder of it actually making it.
Lonnie Bunch grew up in Belleville, New Jersey, where his family was the only African-American one in their neighborhood. He loved baseball, but after one game in a neighboring town, he says the white kids suddenly attacked him and chased him with baseball bats.
I remember that I was exhausted and that I just couldn't run anymore and basically just collapsed in front of this house. And then a little girl comes out and she basically said, "Get off my land." And I thought she was talking to me.
The girl who came to his rescue was white.
Instead, she stood between me and the mob and basically protected me. And it taught me so much because it made me realize never generalize, never assume based on the color of one's skin.
Personal experience helped Bunch develop a passion for history, which he calls his teacher and protector.
For me, history was both a way to understand the American past, but also a way to help me understand why some people treated me wonderfully and some people did not.
Lonnie Bunch is the first African-American leader of the Smithsonian in its 173-year history.
I'm not unaware of the symbolic power of this for many people.
Over the years, Bunch returned again and again to work at the Smithsonian. Air and Space in the late 1970s, American History in the late 80s. And recently, he spent 14 years overseeing the creation of the new National Museum of African American History and Culture, which opened 3 years ago and is the subject of his new book.
You essentially started with nothing.
We started with a staff of 2. We had no idea where the museum would be. We had no collections. We had no money. This museum collected 40,000 artifacts, of which 70% came out of basements, trunks, and attics of people's homes.
One of his most treasured objects, a tin box.
I call it a tin wallet.
A tin wallet? Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that.
Mm-hmm. Handmade by a freed slave, Joseph Trammell. In the wallet, Trammell carried papers, proof of his freedom.
Without that paper, you can be enslaved again. So the key is to protect it and to keep it.
In putting this museum together, did you get some pushback from some people who said, let's not emphasize slavery, let's emphasize the positive things and the heights that we've reached?
Oh, there was an amazing amount of, let's just say guidance that people wanted to give me.
Guidance.
When we did surveys, the number one question people wanted to understand was slavery, and the number one question they didn't want to know about was slavery. So I knew that slavery and freedom had to be at the heart of this museum because it's at the heart of what America was and what America still is.
You used to visit this as a college student.
There was something so powerful about it and poignant.
Back to the 4 objects Bunch selected. This one took us by surprise. A statue at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, which he's visited for decades.
When I was an undergraduate at Howard, this was my escape. I'd wander through this museum.
This very museum?
This very museum, and be made better.
Historian and philosopher Henry Adams commissioned the great sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens to create a memorial to his wife, Marion Clover Adams, a photographer who took her own life at the age of 42.
You can look at that face and you could feel his pain.
The 4th item Bunch selected for us is the lunch counter from a Woolworth's in Greensboro, North Carolina, which he helped bring here.
It is the lunch counter that really sparked a revolution.
On February 1st, 1960, 4 African-American students sat at the whites-only counter and asked to be served. They weren't.
And that excited people around the country to say, this is wrong. How could it be fair that somebody could not simply sit at a lunch counter and eat?
Across the country, more than 3,000 people were arrested until the lunch counters were finally desegregated 6 months later. Again, there's a personal connection.
So it's got to be 1957, 1958. I'm taken to North Carolina to visit relatives. Now, not Greensboro, but Raleigh.
He was allowed to sit at the Woolworths counter in New Jersey, so why not in Raleigh?
And I'm sitting at this lunch counter, and suddenly these white hands pick me up and take me over to the standing part where only colored people could stand. And I remember being dumbfounded, and they served me a hamburger, and the taste was never the same. I never went back to Woolworths after that.
Lonnie Bunch thanks his parents and his grandparents for preparing him to face the world and ultimately the job he has just begun. One thing they told him was that African Americans had to be twice as good to get half as far.
Do you feel that you have to be twice as good?
I feel that the burden of race, the burden of expectation, is often heavier on African Americans. I didn't have the luxury to screw up. In my office, there's a picture of an enslaved woman carrying a big hoe in a basket, and her knuckles are swollen, her dress is tattered, and yet she's looking up and moving forward. To me, being African American means you look up, you move forward, no matter how heavy the burden.
It is called the Enigma machine, the diabolically clever device used by the Nazis to code top-secret messages. The Enigma machine and the man who broke its code are the subject of a new movie. And right now, our story from Anthony Mason.
In 1939, as Nazi troops were invading Poland and threatening Europe, British intelligence secretly moved its code-breaking operation to this country estate about an hour outside of London. At Bletchley Park, the British covertly recruited a team of the country's top cryptographers to try to crack the Germans' Enigma code. Among them, a young mathematician named Alan Turing.
If the Allies broke Enigma, well, it would turn into a very short war indeed.
In the new film, The Imitation Game, out next month, Benedict Cumberbatch plays the mathematics prodigy who would change the course of the Second World War.
How old are you, Mr. Turing?
27.
And how old were you when you became a fellow at Cambridge?
24.
And how old were you when you published this paper that has a title I can barely understand?
23.
And you don't think that qualifies you as a certified prodigy?
Well, Newton discovered binomial theorem aged 22. Einstein wrote 4 papers that changed the world by the age of 26. As far as I can tell, I've barely made par.
That must be sort of intimidating to try to have to put all of that on the screen.
Hell yeah, it is.
To understand Turing's work, Cumberbatch familiarized himself with the Germans' encryption device, called the Enigma machine, on display at London's Imperial War Museum.
This is what Alan Turing was warring against.
This is exactly it. This is the enemy, the crooked hand of death, as it's called in the film.
Mm-hmm. Turing viewed this as kind of a mathematical problem, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he really did. But he also understood that to beat a machine, you had to use a machine rather than humans, because there just wasn't enough time. I like solving problems, Commander. And Enigma is the most difficult problem in the world.
No, Enigma isn't difficult, it's impossible. The Americans, the Russians, the French, the Germans, everyone thinks Enigma is unbreakable.
Good. Let me try, and we'll know for sure, won't we?
What was happening here was top secret.
Absolutely top secret. And in fact, everybody who worked here kept the secret for 30 years after the war.
At Bletchley Park, archivist Victoria Warpole says the code-breaking operation was headquartered in Hut 8.
And this is where Alan Turing had his office. And he was
Turing and his team work with captured German machines. The Nazis set their codes on the Enigma's alphabetic keyboard.
And each time you press it, the light lights up and tells you what to write down as your ciphered text.
The code was reset every day, so the cryptographers had only 24 hours to crack it. The odds, 1 in 159 million.
This was Turing's concept?
Turing came up with the concept originally, yes.
He conceived a massive machine that would mathematically eliminate potential codes. Engineer Tony Jarvis.
You've got a column of 3 vertical. The drums actually replicate one Enigma machine.
Right.
And so what you've got actually 36 Enigmas all looking for an answer.
This machine still works?
It does. It's the only working one in the world. You want to see it running?
I'd love to see it running.
Absolutely.
It took 9 months for Turing and his team to design and build a prototype.
That moment in the film actually gave me goosebumps to think what that must have been like the first time it worked and then stopped to give the settings for the day. I mean, it just has literally stood on the back of my neck, as it must have been for them. I mean, that is a eureka moment.
Cracking the cipher allowed British intelligence to decode messages to German U-boats that had preyed on Allied shipping. It's estimated Turing's work shortened the war by 2 years, saving millions of lives.
I mean, when you think about what he was doing back in the 1940s, how remarkable was it? Stunning.
Jim Hendler, professor of computer science at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, has taught a course on Turing.
He revolutionized cryptography, the modern field of computer science, the subfield of artificial intelligence. A lot of the math of those things goes right back to Turing.
And he did it all essentially in anonymity.
He did it very much in anonymity because during the wartime he was working under secrecy.
Was the family at all aware of what he was doing here?
For the first part of the war, the family didn't know even where he was based.
Sir John Dermot Turing is Alan Turing's nephew.
All those things were completely unknown until the mid-70s.
Even you didn't know what he'd been doing?
No, we crowded around this small black and white TV set that we had at home in the 70s to find out when the BBC put out a little program on it. That's how we found out.
But by then, the man who created the blueprint for the modern computer had already taken his own life. After the war, Turing had become a world-class marathon runner. He moved to the University of Manchester to do research. But in January 1952, he was arrested and charged with gross indecency for having sexual relations with another man.
However, I mean, when he was prosecuted, then he was not in denial about it. He wasn't.
Yeah, he didn't try to hide it.
He didn't try to hide it at all.
Turing was sentenced to probation and required to undergo estrogen treatments, then believed to suppress homosexual desires.
I say it could have been worse, but I still think what happened to him was pretty awful.
In 1954, Turing died after eating an apple dipped in cyanide. He was 41. It would take nearly 60 years for his reputation to be fully rehabilitated. Only last year, he was finally pardoned by Queen Elizabeth. Today at Bletchley Park, now a museum, Alan Turing is celebrated for what he was, a war hero, with a story like something out of a movie.
I'm designing a machine that will allow us to break every message, every day, instantly.
It was an epic life.
A really epic life, a too short epic life, 41 years of it. We owed him at least double that, I'd say.